Hello and welcome to this conversation about clean power, discussing the challenges and opportunities of the low carbon transition for business across the UK. I'm Declan Curry. With me in this discussion, I'm joined by Jacob Briggs, who's a senior consultant at Cornwall Insight. It provides analysis, research and forecasts on the GB energy market. And alongside him is Anthony Ainsworth, who's the Chief Operating Officer at npower Business Solutions. To achieve a clean power system by 2030, change needs to happen at pace. Significant infrastructure needs to be built, and all that comes at a big cost. To fund that transition, businesses across the UK are facing increases in what are called non-commodity costs. npower Business Solutions, its recent business energy tracker, revealed that there is concern in business about those costs, and they split an opinion about who should pay for them and if they are fair. And this is also something that Cornwall Insight tracks in its business energy cost forecast. So what are the key drivers behind these costs? How can business manage them? Jacob and Anthony, welcome to the discussion. Jacob, let's talk about your own sort of analysis and read on the market in terms of energy bills for businesses and where they're going.
Yeah.
What's the direction of travel?
Limited relief maybe in the near term from some of those dynamics that you talked about in terms of rising cost pressures, particularly from that non-commodity space. I think if we look at that cost forecast that you noted, so some of the kind of archetypal, representative large business forecasts that we do on that front, we see costs rising the equivalent of about £500,000 a year by the time we come out to 2030. With the non-commodity element of the bill, so policy and network costs in particular, probably the main driving force behind that.
And we'll drill down into the detail of that in a moment or two. But Anthony, the energy boss has said something startling very recently. It is that even if the cost of gas and electricity on the world markets stayed still, bills would still go up.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the typical business energy invoice, already over half of that is from policy and network costs and system costs, not the actual cost of the energy. And we forecast that those non-commodity costs will increase by 50 to 60% over the next 5 years, and that would make them 75% of the bill. So with those going up, even if wholesale prices fall, actually, as you said, Jacob, limited relief for businesses out there.
Why are these costs going up by that extent?
So Clean Power 2030 is what we're aiming for, and I think that's really worthy. Decarbonising business, decarbonising the economy, I think is the right thing to do. But to fund that transition, to fund that investment in the system, it needs to be paid for. And so to encourage investment in green technologies, to balance the system, to make sure that the network is sufficiently stable and robust, that's where the network costs go, and that's where the costs are going up. Is that fair?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we can perhaps come on to this as we go through, but I think that Clean Power 2030 is an important point to note because, the transmission costs in particular that we've seen be kind of front and centre of some of these near-term cost pressures are in part driven by the need to invest to electrify and to support that renewable generation build-out. And as we look out perhaps beyond the kind of cost forecasting for businesses specifically, some of the wider system level work that we do, we see the ability to bring forward that renewable generation paying dividends. So that's one of the main things that we see driving down wholesale prices as we look to 2030 and beyond. But the ability to facilitate that and see that actually deployed onto the network is what we're seeing in that near term.
Well, let's flesh some of this out a bit and break this down into different elements as well. These non-commodity costs, what are they?
Yeah, so it's effectively trying to recover the costs of operating an electricity system or an energy system as we look out to gas as well, that can bring that wholesale power from where it's generated through to the parties that are looking to use it, whether that's businesses that are the focus for today or households as well. And that covers the sunk costs of the existing electricity network that we have, but also the need to continually renew, develop that, especially with the electrification agenda in mind as well. And also then the kind of wider policy costs that we are looking to fund as well. A lot of that focused on bringing through that renewable generation, but wider elements as well, pieces perhaps more on the household side around bill support for different customer types as well.
So these costs are paying for pretty much every stage along the process.
Exactly.
New sources of energy, whether that's renewable or whatever it happens to be, their connections to the grid, that's part of this?
Yep. Or the cost of funding a grid that can accommodate that, yes.
So beefing up the grid,
Exactly,
improving
yeah.
the grid, fine. And then the onward transmission of that energy. So it's every stage along. And that's pretty critical to where the national life is going over the next decade or so. You know, if we're talking about, for example, having many more electric cars on the road, we need places to charge them up. We need the energy for those. So this greater electrification of society is what's driving this, yes?
Yes, come from hearing NISO talk about some of the future energy scenarios and kind of forecasting work that they do, and seeing the transformative requirements that are coming onto that electricity system, from being able to accommodate electrified transport in the form of EVs, from heat in the form of heat pumps and other technologies as well, is a big ask to put on an electricity system, and one that needs support to be able to meet.
And is this something that can be delayed, that can be put off, that we can stretch the timeline, or is the need for an overhaul of electricity generation and the electricity network so urgent that it has to be done and done quickly?
Yeah, so it is definitely something that needs doing, and there are multiple ways in which we can do it. So one that we can kind of talk through today, and that is receiving a lot of focus from NISO and the energy system, but also from government policy and from parties like npower that are looking to bring forward propositions into the energy space, is on whether we can use the flexibility in how we consume power in terms of the things that we look to connect to the network, so small or giant grid scale batteries, and then in terms of how we are looking to use the generation output from those technologies as well, to change some of the costs perhaps and the timings that are involved in that network reinforcement.
So managing the network, managing our use of energy a bit more effectively.
Exactly, yes. So whilst that is not a perfect substitute for needing to invest in the actual capacity on that network as well, what it does do is give you kind of options and levers to pull in terms of where to prioritise that actual capacity build out versus then other areas where in the near term there might be greater benefits from focusing on better optimization or management of that network as well.
What I'm trying to get a sense of is why we might see some of the big increases that Anthony mentioned in his answer earlier. What are the factors, what are the drivers that make a rise in these costs so inevitable?
Yeah, so we need to build a lot of generation capacity in order to get near to the Clean Power 2030 targets that we're aligned with, and with the kind of longer term net zero ambitions as well, and also to be able to accommodate all of that new source of electricity demand as well, from transport, from heat and from other processes. We are running incredibly close to 2030 as a deadline, and to wider net zero 2050 aims as well. And there is absolutely an urgency of investment in that, both in terms to see that kind of system change happening, but also to be able to reap the benefits from it as well. So, for example, those kind of savings in wholesale price come from having those assets connected. The sooner we can connect them and be realising that, the greater benefit that we can see.
So the sooner we build it, the sooner we get the benefits.
Exactly.
Long term from
exactly.
that. But Andy, there are.
Yeah, let's just build on that a second.
Yeah.
'Cause I think there's sort of really simply three components to the energy system. There's the demand side, the consumption. And as we shift away from fossil fuels, as we electrify fleets, cars, as we turn away from gas for heating and industrial processes, electrification goes up. So there's going to be more demand for electricity. So that's the demand side. Over here, you talked about the generation. So we've got several-fold increase in solar, onshore wind, offshore wind to create some of that. We've got more nuclear planned in the future as well. So you've got the changes, significant changes on the generation side. And then you need to balance the system. You need to get this energy to where the demand is. So you need to invest in the transportation, the transmission, the distribution, the balancing of the network. You need to encourage the investment through contracts for difference, CFDs. You need to recover costs of the nuclear piece. So you've got the nuclear asset base recovery as well. So all of those things in the system, the whole system is changing in every component, and that's why the costs are going up, to manage that whole system and make it work. And then you talk
which makes it sound like to any business leader that might think, I'm not happy with these costs. I don't understand why I have to pay them. Why can't we just leave things alone? That's not an option.
No, I think that that train has left the station in terms of a commitment to decarbonising our economy and the global economy. The business energy tracker that we've just run for the 4th time says, actually, if you talk to businesses, there is support for this. So businesses are absolutely behind decarbonisation. They're absolutely behind the role that they can play in it and investing, but they're just starting to get just a little bit edgy about the cost of doing this. So, maybe the question is not should we be doing this, it's how should we be funding it over what time periods?
But how should we be funding it? Is this path the right path? Are there alternative options that could be considered? Are there ways of doing it, given that it's a societal benefit that might be fairer on business?
Yeah, and we've seen plenty of attention placed on particularly the role of those policy levers. So you talked about CFD, the nuclear asset-based recovery program as well, and then some of the longer-term pieces that we've been using to support those obligations, and whether the electricity bill is the right place to be recovering those. Yes, from the perspective of business costs, but broader than that as well, obviously, given those same cost pressures being front and centre of mind on household energy bills as well, that same conversation taking place there. I thought one of the nice pieces out of that business tracker was exploring the kind of support for some of those other mechanisms as well. So whether the home for that is in a taxation system that sits outside of the direct place in the energy bill that we see them at the minute, and interested whether there are more innovative approaches around kind of bringing those forward as well, is very much a live conversation. And I think it's a testament to where we've kind of got to, that it is, as you say, front and centre of businesses' minds, that not whether these are costs that we ought to be bearing as a society, but how can we best do that to make sure that we deliver what we're trying to do.
Are they seen as unfair, these costs?
The tracker doesn't tell us that they're seen as unfair, but there's concern about the speed of which they're rising and the impact they'll have on businesses. What we see is that businesses want policy certainty over the medium term. When businesses invest, they make a business case, they invest, they get a return. So they want some consistency of policy to be able to do that. And also they want to be able to decarbonise their business, have a good, robust, reliable supply, and if they can drive down the costs of doing that as well, then that helps. That's the perfect world. So it's not necessarily whether it's fair or unfair. It's really the economics of it and the timing of the economics of it, because ultimately we want businesses to be strong and competitive on a European basis and an international basis. And if we look at it now, a typical energy bill for a business in the UK would be 50% more expensive than the equivalent one in France or Germany, or 4 times more expensive than one in the US. So, if as a country we want to drive growth and prosperity, actually energy plays an enormous part of that. It's a big factor in every business. So it's about economic viability rather than fairness, I think.
What are your clients saying about this? Your organisation does consultancy, it does training with businesses in Britain and elsewhere. What are they saying when the door's closed and they're really bearing their hearts?
Yeah, so one of the main bits that I'd actually pick on with that in mind is one of the points that you ended on, I think, of that desire to engage with this as Yeah, an opportunity, yes, one driven by cost pressures, absolutely, but one where there is the opportunity for agency and kind of benefit to come from it as well. And so one of the main areas that we spend a lot of time working on with businesses, but also with suppliers, brokers, generators as well, is looking at some of the levers that companies can pull, particularly around the contracting and power purchasing piece. So a lot of cool, innovative work going on at the minute in terms of some of the different ways that businesses can look to work with sources of new, in particular, or existing generation to both help the kind of bankability and investment case for that generation, but also then to benefit from it themselves as well, especially in some of the behind the meter use cases, which, so bit of jargon, but effectively looking to invest in this stuff on site or near to their site and use private network infrastructure to be able to maximise their benefits from it. So hosting some solar panels on a fleet depot site, for example, exploring putting some storage container sized battery assets in to then both benefit from reducing reliance on grid imports and the costs that we've talked about being associated with that. The policy and network element is one of the main places that you can see a benefit from reducing your exposure to there. From wider resiliency opportunities as well. So you've got more control over your energy use when in the day you're looking to deploy that and getting some benefit there. But also then to be potentially unlocking some of those win-win dynamics where exactly that kind of network management capability and the low or zero carbon generation is being built, and it happens to be being built on the sites of some businesses. There is absolutely a system benefit there that can relieve some of that pressure on transmission network investment or on kind of wider subsidy requirements as well.
So this is where business can engage in some self-help, as it were, is have a detailed look at where its energy comes from, how it uses its energy, how it manages its energy.
Absolutely. So the first thing to do to reduce your bills is actually trying to reduce your consumption, really, to start with. So understanding what is using energy, where you're using it, what time of day you're using it, can give you insight, and that alone can sometimes help businesses make some shifts in demand patterns and save money there. But to building on what you say, Jacob, actually, if we can encourage government to really think about policy and incentives around corporate PPAs, so the matching of building generation, matching that to specific businesses and demand, can avoid network costs, and you don't have to invest in the network to do some of that. So that's great. Energy efficiency, on-site generation, all of those things, really good policy incentives in place, I think will help solve part of that picture as well.
Right, crystal ball time. How do you see the energy market evolving in the time ahead of us?
Yeah, so I think you touched on some of the ones that we put out here where perhaps in the near term we see government engagement on some of those areas. So on that, being able to work with industry to support that corporate PPA space. By virtue of where it is in its maturity and how site-specific or company-specific some of those can be, the visibility is a lot poorer than the much more mature front-of-meter, i.e. grid-scale, giant generation power purchasing world. And so work to unlock that is important. And then the other, where I think some of the biggest change has come in the last 12 months and where we see it moving in that near term as well, is on that flexibility piece. So it's very much in the weeds of energy market regulation, but some quite impactful changes have come that have made it far easier for parties that are looking to help businesses be flexible with when that electricity gets used, with understanding their use and being able to monitor it and do something with that, have come. So much easier now to build up the commercial value for that. Not solved by any means, there's still a lot of work to do, but we've seen some quite big changes there and opening up new opportunities, especially in that wholesale market. And we do expect those to kind of grow. They've been in place about a year now. Some of them are only just coming into force now. So we see that space maturing and helping businesses with new parties and existing ones building out their offerings there. And beyond just that proposition space, more kind of policy and government focus on unlocking some of that flexibility as well. It's a critical technology in terms of being able to meet Clean Power 2030 is in unlocking some of that kind of latent flexibility perhaps in the industrial commercial sector.
And when you rub the crystal ball, what do you see?
I think I'd say look at the components of the energy system and the growth in all of those. So in terms of renewable generation, there's a 2 to 4-fold increase required in solar and wind, whether that's onshore or offshore. So that's a massive increase from where we are. But we've seen that start to ramp up. So big changes coming there, big changes coming in electrification of supply. And the demand, the shift, and that's fairly nascent, as you said, but it's really, really interesting to see both really from almost an individual household user, the time of use and shifting demand there, all the way through to large corporates and factories and storage facilities, for example. We're starting to see that. We're working with customers here as well as how can they shift the demand patterns that they've got. So there's lots of things happening all the way through the energy system, and I think most of it's all for the good. But whether all of those system elements are in balance, or whether all the policy elements are in balance at the moment, they could probably do with a little more system thinking on that.
Do your business customers have a sense of the scale of what's ahead of us in terms of the electrification of Britain, in terms of the change that's coming? Have we woken up to it yet?
I think the short answer to that is probably not, and the longer answer is I've got a really wide range of customers, from those that spend £20,000 a year to those that spend 200 million. At this end, they're really aware of what's happening. It's a big part of their business. It's a big part of their investment. But actually, we need to get the whole of business to understand what is happening here, but also flip it around the other way and say this is a force for good. Businesses drive growth. Competitive businesses protect jobs. So if we get this right, there is a virtuous circle in there, and business should be part of delivering that message about why Clean Power 2030 is a positive thing.
And Jacob, government is a key player in this. It's such a huge economic, social, business change. The government has to have an active role in it. What should government be doing more of if it's doing it well? What should it be doing differently if it's doing things badly?
Definitely agree on that critical role for government. I would say one of the important, impactful things that are really valuable we've seen with Clean Power 2030, setting clear, ambitious, but near-term objectives to be met, we've definitely seen a stimulating effect on that in terms of both, like you say, that business engagement directly across the market, predominantly at that larger end, but also then with parties looking to bring forward some of that innovation, some of those propositions into the space as well. I think the areas that we've seen that are encouraging, we're definitely the pieces under the Clean Flexibility Roadmap and the Industrial Strategy, so two of the headline government policy papers that were put out over the kind of bookends of summer, have done some good work to try and put the kind of building blocks in place to move us towards that kind of ambitious objective with Clean Power 2030. And targeting those at some of the kind of points of challenge for business. So things like being able to better engage with working directly with generators, recognising some of the kind of information and accessibility gaps there, and setting out at least the kind of work streams to try and engage with that, and looking to facilitate kind of some of the market innovation that they look to see, maybe rather than direct it.
If I made you the Secretary of State for Energy, or whatever we call them nowadays, you have one day in the job, what's the first thing you do? What's the priority?
Bringing some of that near-term policy certainty that we've talked about as being so important for businesses, and looking to perhaps enshrine some of those goals around Clean Power 2030 in that transition, to let businesses make the investment that we need to be able to get us there, and that can be such a kind of beneficial lever for them as well.
And 2030 is the target. Have we enough momentum to get there on time?
So we don't see us quite getting to that 2030 objective in our kind of wider system level modelling, but whether, I might say that whether we get there by the middle of 2031 or the 31st of December 2030 isn't that important. What's been super important is that catalytic role that it's played in bringing forward that investment now to get us as close as we can and to get there far sooner than we would have without that kind of objective and that requirement in place.
I think the benefits of Clean Power 2030 will be felt for decades to come afterwards. So whilst it seems a very short period, 4 or 5 years away now, actually the benefits are over a lot longer period. And it's that makes me think about what is the appropriate funding model. Are we trying to squeeze too much cost in too short of a period rather than actually thinking the benefits are over multiple generations here? So maybe we should think about that differently.
So we could take a breath and maybe spread the costs out, delay the deadline, or just spread the costs out?
I think by having really ambitious deadlines is driving activity, it's driving innovation, it's driving technology, it's driving policy. And I think having an impetus behind that is really good, because it will make a difference. So it's not slow down on that, it's just think of the economic consequences of loading up business energy bills with things when it's a super competitive market out there already. So go fast on the implementation, maybe just slow down on some of the funding routes.
Jacob, Anthony, a really fascinating look under the bonnet. Thank you both very much. And if you want more information on the things we've been talking about here in this discussion, the Business Energy Tracker is available for download right now.